Hi, I'm AJ Titter, author of Magic and Myth. And this is the second video in my series reading through my short story, Torched Feathers. I will link the first video down below if you weren't able to catch that yet. So let's begin with this second scene. The clan's decision wasn't unanimous, but the majority agreed with Canna that the best way to protect themselves was to negotiate. And so they sent Halgrond their terms, and a small delegation of men arrived a few days later. Once the leaders gathered, silence hung over the meeting lodge. Not even the birds or insects sang their songs. Fledgling sat with Kitten toward the front of the lodge. She wanted to memorize every detail. It would be her duty to remind and enforce these terms in later generations.
"The king is grateful for the wood you will bequeath to us," the king's ambassador said to the three women.
When he spoke, the exotic feather gracing his huge floppy bonnet tickled the man's face behind him. His clothing was not meant for labor. The shoulders of his doublet were larger than his head, and they appeared to be stuffed with some sort of fur which poked through decorative cuts. If the king's man dresses like this, what must the king wear? Fledgling marveled. We do not make this decision lightly. We are only a speck of the animals that rely on this forest. But we trust Halgrond will honor our deal, Emmis said.
"To show his sincerity, the king is gifting you with one of the ancient relics from the Great Terror," the ambassador said.
He snapped his fingers, and the man behind him stepped up to hand him some cloth.
"The king realizes the gravity of your decision. In return, he wants to show his earnestness for peace between our peoples. Please accept the mantle of transfiguration to seal our treaty."
He held out the cloth to the women. Canna took the cloth, letting it unfold so they could examine it. Nain and Emmis touched the garment as they spoke in hushed tones.
"It's real. Try it if you like," the ambassador said.
Canna undid the clasp and swung the cloak behind her, settling it on her shoulders. Fledgling watched as her mother disappeared. A river birch grew in her place. A collective gasp filled the meeting lodge. The older generations marveled at the sight of an authentic relic. The younger generations sat dumbfounded. Then her mother reappeared, replacing the river birch. She removed the cloak, hanging it reverently over her arm. Canna bowed her head. "The king is most generous. We look forward to years of peace between our people." Immediately after the delegation left, the women displayed the mantle of transfiguration in the front of the meeting lodge. They allowed any clansman who wished to examine it to come forward. Canna, Emmis, and Nain remained near the cloth to assist and speak with those that tested the veracity of it. Fledgling stayed seated. Ermis joined her, wearing one of his mischievous grins. "Watch," Ermis whispered as he pointed to a brother from the Sea Clan. "I dared him to turn himself into a pile of lapala scat." "You didn't." Ermis' grin grew as he nodded his head. Fledgling covered her mouth to conceal her giggles as the brother put the cloak on. He closed his eyes, but nothing happened. Ermis frowned. Emmis walked away from the group of women she was speaking with. "It won't work for you," Emmis said to the brother wearing the cloak. "Only women can wield its power." She took the cloak from the brother and set it on the shoulders of the sister waiting to try it. "Well, that was disappointing," Ermis mumbled. Then he looked at Fledgling. "Don't even think about it," she said. Ermis did his best to look pitiful. "I can't," Fledgling said as she brought up her knees and hugged them. "I would be in a lot of trouble." When Canna noticed the change in Fledgling's body language, she descended the platform to join Ermis and her daughter. She sat facing the pair, resting her back against a support for the platform behind her. She looked fondly at her daughter before turning her attention to Ermis. "Stop trying to corrupt the next Canna." Fledgling gave Ermis a smug look. He made a funny face, sending her into a fit of laughter. Her mother smiled. "Did the king give it to us because he can't use it?" Fledgling asked after her laughter subsided. "I doubt it," her mother replied. "Where did it come from?" It's from the time when all people lived as one. Fledgling's eyes grew wide. That's older than the ancient trees of this wood. The grandmothers and grandfathers tell stories of that time around the fires. Stories of great men and women who spoke face to face with the Great Mother. They would journey far and wide to perform tasks for special blessings. But Fledgling didn't remember any stories about a cloak. What woman did the Great Mother give the cloak to? Canna stood and rested her hand on her daughter's head. It's not a story you would have heard. Irmis, would you like to join us for the evening meal? It would be my honor, Canna. Irma stood too, pulling Fledgling up with him. So if you've been following me for a little while, you'll know that Tarnished Relics, my upcoming novel, is set in a world that's medieval and 18th century Europe. This story is set about 100 years before that. So you're going to see like the description of the clothing for the Halgrondites in this is probably more late 1500s, early 1600s. I do have a very broad timeline of history for this world, including major events such as the Great Terror. For that event specifically, I do have some ideas swirling around for either a short story or perhaps even for a novel. In this section, we first learn about the Mantle of Transfiguration, and that will be showing up again in the novel, Tarnished Relics. And it actually plays a fairly significant role. There are 3 relics that the god Isteni has gifted the people during the time of the Great Terror, and it's those that Tarnished Relics focuses on. You might notice in this story that the clans believe it was the Great Mother who gifted the cloak. This is because, as I mentioned, there was a time when all the people lived together as one, and that was a very, very long time ago. And since then, between the time that's passed and the people separating into their different people groups, they each have come up with their own version of history and what happened, and also have or began to worship different gods since that time. So that's all I have for this segment. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.